Okay, so tomorrow you have your 5A quiz over the cell cycle. So I want to just do a quick review that may help you doing your vocab square today and will definitely help you to review for tomorrow's quiz. So, cell cycle. Cells get old, cells get injured. So the body needs a way to replace them. And the theory is that every 7 years, your body has a whole totally new set of cells. Okay, so the cell cycle is basically in two stages. Okay, so this diagram is really good, has a whole lot of information. So cell cycle, just like a butterfly's life cycle, has a circular idea behind it. So if we look at this graphic of the cell cycle, here's what you should notice. From this point all the way to this point. So everything not in the yellow wedge is interphase. And in interphase, a cell is being a cell. It's doing its job. Sometimes it may be considered resting, but that misleads you to think it's not doing anything. It depends where the cell is in your body or where it is in the organism's body to what it's doing. So you may see the word resting, but that basically means not dividing. Okay? So all of this, if this is the whole life cycle of a cell, you can see a majority of it is spent in interphase. Okay? And these are the phases of the cell cycle. We have G1, which is where the cell's growing, gap 1. And you'll notice it has a checkpoint. This is really important when it comes to cancer cells because cancer cells is a normal cell that ignores the rules. So before this goes into DNA replication, the body says, hey, wait a minute, cell, are you ready to do this? And if a normal cell says, no, not yet, it'll stay in gap 1 phase. If it meets all the check marks criteria, it'll move into the S phase. S is synthesis. When you synthesize something, you make, okay? And this is where the DNA is duplicated, okay? But cancer cells, on the other hand, they see that rule and they're like, psh, later. They ignore the rules, they ignore the checkpoints. I'm ready to divide and I'm going to keep dividing. And they divide faster and they ignore and they keep piling up and piling up. And that's when you get a tumor. So cancer cells are normal cells that ignore the rules. They don't follow the checkpoints. They just keep dividing and dividing. And that's not good. Obviously, anyone who's been around anyone who's suffered with cancer knows that it's not a good thing. Okay, so we have gap 1, which is growth, then the synthesis phase, S, and then gap 2, which is more cell growth. And there's another checkpoint. Before the cell starts dividing, there's another checkpoint. Say, hey, are you ready? Cancer cells once again go, later, I am going to divide. So these two checkpoints, cancer cells totally ignore, and they just keep dividing. Normal cells follow the rules. So if it meets the checkpoint, then it goes into mitosis. And mitosis is the stage in the cell cycle where it's actively dividing. And you can see it's a small portion of the life cycle of a cell. Majority of the time is spent in interphase. And so you had an assignment last Tuesday where you had to list the 4 stages of the cell cycle. And so you should have had G1, S phase, G2, and M. And then you had to have a short description of each one. So that was last Tuesday's assignment. Okay. Then let's zoom in on this yellow wedge where the cell is not in interface and it's actively dividing. It's past the checkpoints and it's ready to divide. Okay. So mitosis is dividing. It's making a new cell and it goes through certain steps. In a normal cell, a cell in interphase, you can't see the chromosomes. It's not until it's getting ready to divide in mitosis they actually become visible under a microscope. And if you think about it, remember our lesson on chromosomes we did on the 25th? Chromosomes are made up of DNA, and DNA is this twisted of genetic information, and it's important the cell protects it. So it is covered with a protein, a histone, that keeps, so when it starts dividing, it keeps all that precious DNA safe. So pieces don't break off. And then that's where we have mutations, and not good things happen when you lose DNA in the directions for the cell. So it's protected, and that makes them thicker. And it's at this time in prophase you start seeing the chromosomes. For pro means before. It's getting ready to go. Pro is getting ready to go. And so that's going to be your first stage. Pro is preparing. Okay? You start to see the chromosomes because they're now thicker in order to protect them in dividing. Remember, the key tenet of biology is form fits function. So it needs to protect that DNA because it has all the instructions. Okay. Then we have metaphase. And in metaphase, the way I remember it is meta, middle. So prophase, you see the chromosomes. In metaphase, the chromosomes with the two chromatids line up down the middle. So that's how I always remember it, meta, middle. And so if you see the chromosomes in the center, that's your metaphase. And anaphase, ana, the way I remember it, ana means away. And so the chromosomes are going to separate. And they're going to move away from each other. So prophase, getting ready to go. Metaphase, in the middle. Anaphase, move away. And then telophase, you start to get two new cells. So telo 2, you get the new nucleus. You can start seeing the nucleus again. And both chromosomes are in the new nucleus. So you have the formation of a nucleus. You have two cells. So to recognize telophase, it'll be kind of like an 8, and you'll start seeing the nucleus. And the chromosomes will be fading, okay? It may still be connected, probably will be. Cytokinesis. Cyto means cell, kinesis, we're cutting that bad boy in half. So cytokinesis, it's complete and you have your two new cells. So the cytoplasm is in both, we have a nucleus in both, and both nucleuses have complete genetic information. Okay? So just to recap, this is the life cycle of a cell. The cell spends most of its life in interphase. doing its cell job. And it has checkpoints. Before it moves to the next stage, there's checkpoints it has to pass to move on. So this is interphase. Then zooming in on mitosis. We start off, mitosis is pro, it's getting ready to go. The chromosomes are preparing. They're now visible. Metaphase, middle. The chromosomes are lined up in the middle of the cell. So you'll see the little X's down the center. Anaphase, there's the two centromeres and you have the spindle fibers. So it'll kind of look like this with the X's, and the chromosomes are moving away from the center into their new cell. And telophase, two new nucleuses are forming. So pro, you're getting ready. Meta, they're lined up. They're thick. In prophase, they're thickening and becoming visible. Metaphase, they line up in the center. Anaphase, they pull away on spindle fibers towards the ends. Telophase, two new nucleuses form, and cytokinesis cuts it in half. That is the cell cycle. Good luck on your 5A quiz tomorrow.